Hello and welcome to round 5 here at the World Magic Cup. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by R&D member Ian Duke, and I'm very excited to head down to the feature match area because while we have a fair idea of how Brazil has chosen to solve this standard problem, Belarus have come out of nowhere, currently 4-0 in this tournament. Looking forward to seeing what they're doing in standard. Let's head down to the feature match area right now and check that out. Hello and welcome to round 5 here at the World Magic Cup. It is Team Belarus against Team Brazil. Both of these teams currently undefeated, now in unified standard. Pavel Medvedsky, Evgeny Zakharenkov and Nikita Sherbakov having the absolute day of their lives here alongside their coach Alexei Aramoniak. Up against Team Brazil, though, they've got a tough ride because that is Hall of Famer Paulo Vitor Dama da Rosa. He's led his team of Lucas Esparberto, Leonardo de Castro and Bruno Müller to an undefeated record also. And if there's one person in the room who knows how to play Esper Dragon super well, you have to say it's Paulo Vitor Dama da Rosa. But he's up against what appears to be basically a fully powered, if you will, Abzan aggro deck in the hands of Nikita Sherbakov.
Yeah, it looks like Belarus made some sacrifices in their other decks in order to accommodate basically a perfect mana base for Abzan aggro. So we're going to see something very similar to what we see in non-unified standard, in regular standard.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the relative statistics for these two teams. Belarus, not a huge amount of experience, it must be said, at the Pro Tour level. Just the one Pro Tour, just the one day one, in fact. Meanwhile, Brazil has a fairly lopsided set of stats. Second highest in career earnings of any of the teams at this event. That almost exclusively off Hall of Famer Paulo Vitor Dama da Rosa. However, things have kicked off here in this game. We've got an Heir of the Wild starting out for Nikita Sherbakov. And there's Jace Vryn's prodigy for Paulo Vitor Dama da Rosa, the poster child of the latest iterations of Blue Control.
So great starts for both decks. Both players have all their colors of mana and have led off with a pretty solid 2-drop in both cases.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the Abzan aggro decks migrated to having the Heir of the Wilds rather than Hangerback Walker, just because they found that in mirror matches, having the Death Touch very helpful. Anafen's the foremost to play there for Nikita Sherbakov on turn 3. In this exact matchup against Esper, I think that potentially having the Hangerback Walker might have been tempting. As it is, it's not necessarily a card that's finding a place in some of these unified standard deck lists.
Yeah, in fact, Belarus is playing one of their 3 decks is Eldrazi Ramp, which actually is taking a couple of copies of Hangerback Walker.
Paulo Vitor Dama da Rosa here, luxuriating in actually being able to activate Jace, figure out what he wants to keep. And of course, with fetch lands, getting Jace flipped into Jace Telepath Unbound, not too tough. Painful Truths also an addition to Dama da Rosa's hand, so assuming that he feels like he's got life to play with, he can draw an awful lot of extra cards. And with the likes of Foul Tongue Invocation, his destiny's kind of under his own control in terms of how much life he's got.
However, one sticky situation for Paulo here. It looks like his only possibility for a 3rd land is another Shambling Vent, which will enter the battlefield tapped, which will prevent him from casting Foul Tongue Invocation this turn. So he goes with the Ultimate Price instead.
Ultimate Price, of course, only able to take out Heir of the Wilds there. Multicolored Anafenza. Sticking around, though, lots and lots of abilities on Anafenza, not least of which a 4/4 for 3 mana, which will certainly take a chunk out of Paulo Vitor's life total soon enough. We can see there not too much in the way of other creatures for Sherbakov. He's got Warden the first tree to cast, can't, of course, cast a second Anafenza. But with Gideon Ally of Zendikar, he can end up with plenty of creatures in play if he so chooses. But no second basic, meaning that Wooded Foothills not able to fetch untapped lands that he may wish here, needing the extra white mana somewhere in the mix.
And that's going to make a huge difference here because that's the difference between being able to cast Gideon on turn 4 against a tapped out controlled opponent, which would be huge there.
Yeah, the Warden, Obviously a perfectly fine card. It's something that Nikita will be perfectly happy to have in his deck, but not necessarily what he was looking to cast on turn 4 in a perfect world. We see their Warden the first tree. Starts off as a 1-1, fairly rapidly gets quite a bit better, gradually advancing to become a 3-3, getting a few extra abilities, and at some point just becoming a massive monster, though realistically it's likely that Paulo Vitor Damadorosa will have something to say about that.
So it looks like in the meantime, Paulo has picked up a couple more lands, so he will be able to hit 5 on 5, it looks like. Foul Tongue Invocation, revealing Ojutai, takes out the Warden in the first tree, gaining 4 life for PV. And Polluted Delta will set up an untapped Prairie Stream on turn 5, which could actually cast that Ojutai. So both players looking like they have a good amount of game here headed into the middle of this match.
And Paulo not choosing to activate his Jace yet, potentially looking to block, then activate after blockers to flip into Jace, Jace Telepath Unbound, protecting a little bit of damage. Yes, it means that he gets 1 less Planeswalker activation than if he did activate it in his turn, but in this case, if he'd flipped sooner, Jace might have just got killed off.
Right, and that Planeswalker activation would have just been a -2 to the Onofenza anyway, so being able to block it is sort of like -4ing it instead.
But we already have our first result from one of our back tables. Lucas Esper Berto already a game up with Ataka Red against Pavel Miadvedsky. Naya Eldrazi ramp, I mean, that a matchup that, I mean, we heard Frank Carsten talking about the way that these decks stack up in Unified Standard. Eldrazi versus Ataka Red is not a good matchup for the Eldrazi. Jace Telepath Unbound there on 5 loyalty. And potentially enabling some spells cast from the graveyard, or in the meantime, a little bit of protection from the gigantic 4/4 Anafenza in play. Sherbakov there has Alexei Romaniak next to him to provide a little bit of support there, a second opinion on some of the tougher decisions. Each of these teams has 4 players, and the alternate, or the 4th player on the team that's not playing with a deck in any given round, is able to provide assistance to any teammates. And if people are locked in, constructed to their deck, or in limited to their deck, so 1 switch per day.
So meanwhile, Sherbakov taking the opportunity while Paulo is tapped out to resolve Gideon, ally of Zendikar, a huge threat from the perspective of a control deck. Paulo responds with Dragonlord Ojutai, which will hope to take out the Gideon next turn, if it can.
Yeah, I would say that at this stage in the game, it feels to me like the Abzan aggro deck has had more of the run of the cards. It's been able to achieve more of the early game things that it wants to. As it is, part of that is just down to the fact that Esper Dragons, its big important plays don't tend to come until slightly later in the game. The fact that Jace is already flipped and that Dragonlord Ojutai is in play, though, signals to me that both of these decks doing pretty well for themselves, and we've got a real game on our hands.
So Sherbakov looking to attack here, a little bit of a dispute over where we are in the turn. He does attack with Onofenza and the Knight Ally token, which signifies potential Abzan Charm. Paulo deciding if he wants to block and play into that charm or not. Potentially keeps a lot of pressure off him if he does block the Knight token. That'll tie up most of Sherbakov's turn to play the Abzan Charm, and the Ojutai will still trade with that 5/5 token. So I like this play from Paulo.
And you called it. There is the Abzan Charm. Pumps Anafenza, also pumps the Knight Ally token, just enough for the trade there.
Excuse me, I should say 4/4 ally token, because one of the counters gets to go on Onofenza.
Now, there is a Crux of Fate in Paulo Vitor Damadorosa's hand here, but the fact that Gideon is already in play makes that a slightly shaky proposition. Yes, it can kill all the creatures that Nikita Sherbakov has in play, but Sherbakov can quite happily either choose to churn out some more creatures with Gideon or simply get stuck in with the Planeswalker.
Looking at Paulo's hand here, it seems he has a copy of Dragonlord Silumgar and an island to cast it. So he's just debating, I guess, between casting the Crux of Fate or playing the island and the Dragonlord Silumgar, probably stealing Gideon and Maybe Paulo's thinking about, does he want to steal Gideon and make an emblem to ensure that the Gideon is just off the battlefield, even if Dragonlord Silumgar should die somehow? Or does he feel like he's far enough behind that he starts to needs to start making night tokens with Gideon?
At 15 life, it feels like there ought to be a little bit of breathing room here. But we will see soon enough. The Hall of Famer immediately says, I'm going to get rid of that loyalty counter. I mean, if ever that you needed more proof of disloyalty than Dragonlord Silumgar saying, come over here, it's all of the loyalty going away. Gideon in the graveyard, there is now an emblem in play. So Dragonlord Silumgar, just a little bit bigger.
Yeah, and I think that's generally the standard play when you steal a Gideon, is just to get it off the battlefield, ensure that even if Dragonlord Silumgar dies, that you're not now again facing down a bunch of creatures and a Planeswalker. And with Paulo having the Crux in his hand, he knows as long as he gets the Gideon off the battlefield, even if Sherbakov follows up with another creature, Crux will take them all out. And it's a good thing that he did do that, because here comes Abzan Charm to take out Dragonlord Silumgar.
Fairly big swing here, though. 8 damage coming through, enough to kill off Jace. Though a timely draw of another Jace there for Paulo. While the board's empty, he can happily cast Crux of Fate without any concern. Plenty of cards in the graveyard, so the dig through time that Paulo is considering is still going to leave plenty of juicy targets for that Jace if he so chooses.
So generally speaking, I like Paulo's position in this game. He's managed to make it to the mid-game. He's got 6 lands on the battlefield. His opponent had only 1 card in hand starting this turn, and Paulo has a dig through time ready to find more answers or more threats, as the case may be. However, Sherbakov, I believe, picked up a Den Protector this turn, which is one of the biggest draws he could possibly get. It's going to ensure that he'll have continued threats into the mid and late game. And we'll see what Paulo can come up with as a response.
Yeah, Den Protector was the morph there. He still has Anafenza the Foremost in hand, and those two actually pair up fairly nicely, just because at some point it makes Den Protector very difficult to block indeed if you start throwing around extra +1/+1 counters on it. The most important ability in this particular matchup, though, just being able to get back things from your graveyard.
And I like that Sherbakov left mana untapped to ensure that he gets value out of turning the Den Protector face up. Sometimes players in this position feel that when a control deck has hit their stride in the mid or late game, that they're just, so far behind they kind of panic and play out all their threats at once. But with Den Protector, actually I think 4 copies of Den Protector in his deck, Sherbakov is set up to actually play a longer game against Esper Dragons and just hang in there with a flow of card advantage and continue presenting threats.
Dig through time, though, the big spell resolving for Paulo Vitor Damaderosa. Taking a look at a new 7 in order to find the best 2 to add to his hand. It looks like Jace is coming back. We were talking last round about the fact that there are a few things that you can be completely sure of going into Team Unified Standard, because there's obviously a lot of variables, but almost everybody's probably going to have been looking for which Jace deck they wanted to play.
Definitely true.
And there comes that Den Protector flip. Gets the +1/+1 counter from Megamorph, and it looks like that's an Abzan Charm coming back. Lots of versatility and power there.
Yeah, a couple different options there. One option was to go for Gideon and just try to present a diversity of threats. Gideon's a hard card to answer once it resolves, but Abzan Charm just ensuring that there'll be a flow of card advantage. Also a nice choice there.
And there comes Anafenza. Den Protector getting to attack in there, not able to be blocked by Jace, even with the help of a Gideon emblem, to mean that we're in an unusual position where Jace has some power to work with. So a little bit of a thought here for the Hall of Famer.
Looks like Paulo with a pair of Dig Through Times in his hand and a backup copy of Jace. So plenty of ways to find the cards that he needs, but no immediate answers to what Sherbakov has on the board. I like what Sherbakov did with the Den Protector, returning Abzan Charm, let him play the Anafenza this turn, and also leave up mana to Abzan Charm end of turn, and just keep the threats flowing.
And Jace flips. Tempting to Crux of Fate here. And that's exactly the play that comes from Palo Vitor Damaderosa. All non-dragons likely to be killed off in this. There we see the moment that everything changed in the plane of Tarkir.
A little bit strange to Obzon Charm in response to the Crux of Fate, unless I'm missing something there. That could give Paulo information about, for example, whether he wants to use a counterspell on the Obzon Charm or follow up with a Jace after the Crux of Fate. But nonetheless, it does resolve. And down comes Gideon. This is huge.
In the Battle of the Planeswalkers, Gideon, the one that tends to win in the red zone. Jace, well, working with a few other zones, including the graveyard, pretty effectively. This is, of course, still game one for our match between Nikita Sherbakov and Palo Vitor Damaderosa. Even whoever wins this match, they still require one of their teammates to win as well. This best 2 out of 3 matches between Brazil and Belarus here. And currently, neither team has lost any in total. A little sneaky attack in here with Shambling Vents.
Now, Tim, I'm a bit confused. Is that Crux of Fate in Paulo's graveyard? Is that a second one? I thought he flashed back the first one. Okay, there. Looks like they just caught it, too.
Lovely stuff. 3 life gained there off the Shambling Vent, of course, because of the Guinean Emblem. Up to 14 for Palo Vitor Damaderosa here. And Shambling Vent, another reason that the Abzan aggro mana base looks a little shaky in terms of trying to build for Team Unified Constructed, is that both decks want it, and we see both decks have some in play here. Gideon getting an attack in here. Followed by Warden the first tree. And here we see the reason for the attack. This looks like a post-combat Wingmate Rock. And I don't believe we've seen any counter magic at any point so far from Palo Vitor Damaderosa this game.
Yeah, that is true. We did see a copy of Duress in the graveyard earlier, and that could indicate that Paulo has gone for a more counter magic light version of the deck, and opting for more Duresses to supplement that, which I think is reasonable based on the metagame that one can expect in Unified Standard.
I mean, one of the key lures of being Esper Dragons versus another type of Esper control is Silumgar's Scorn, a very powerful counterspell.
Yep, definitely true. But you don't want to be too counter heavy when you're expecting, for example, a lot of Atarka red. You'd rather play more proactive cards like Duress instead of a counterspell.
Now, what does Palo Vitor Damaderosa do against the likes of Wingmate Rock, etc., when you've already used your Crux of Fate? Most of these decks typically only run 1 Crux of Fate, right?
Yeah, I'm taking a look through Paulo's list here. Yeah, it looks like he does have access to a second Crux of Fate that he could find with Dig Through Time, for example. Also, Dragon Lord Ojutai just matches up fairly well against Wingmate Rock tokens. You do have to be careful about, you know, like Obzon Charm or Gideon Emblem or something along those lines, boosting them up. But for now, Ojutai may be able to hold the fort.
And Gideon could make an emblem here if Sherbakov so chooses. Sherbakov doing a great job of, even once it appeared that he was sort of running out of cards, he does not appear to have run out of any kind of pressure here.
Yeah, he's definitely been playing the game in such a way to just continue presenting threats 1 or 2 at a time, forcing Paulo to react to them. So I really like his play so far this game. And at this stage, this is definitely anyone's game. If anything, I'd say Paulo's a bit behind here, just with the diversity of threats that Sherbakov has access to. Looks like he does go for that Gideon Emblem.
So the Wingmate Rock plus Friend, a little bit scarier here. What they're just checking here is around the activation of Shambling Vent. Sherbakov said combat, and that would indicate that you're in the declare attacker step, at which point it's too late to activate your Shambling Vent. It's not just about setting your stops, it's about knowing how your opponent's stops work.
So with the addition of that Gideon emblem, those Wingmate rocks are both 4/5s, which means Dragonlord Ojutai would have to trade with one if it blocks. Paulo digging a little bit with Jace.
Now Sherbakov has left the door open, it would appear here, for an attack on Gideon from PV's Dragonlord Ojutai. Warden the first tree, the block here for Ojutai. With the amount of mana that Sherbakov has available, certainly a concern that there might be some activations here. Currently, I believe that Warden the first tree is at level 1. So a 3/3 or 4/4, I guess, thanks to the emblem. At level 2, you get Trample and Lifelink. Human Spirit Warrior, of course. If there had been the opportunity to go all the way up to level 3, then we start throwing counters around and it gets all kinds of scary.
Oh, you know what, Tim? I've actually missed the whole time. I'd forgotten that Paulo has that Gideon emblem of his own from the Dragonlord Silumgar earlier when he stole Gideon. So that does put the Ojutai out of range of trading with any of those attackers. So apologies to the viewers at home if you've been utterly confused.
Not too often that the Esper Dragons deck is able to pump up its team with a Gideon emblem.
That is true.
Though the Japanese have got Gideon in their sideboard for this deck.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So here comes Foul-Tongue Invocation from Palavitor Damaderosa. Between Wingmate Rock and the bird token Wingmate Rock brings along, it's a fairly straightforward choice as to which one to sacrifice. But the 4 life certainly not going to hurt for Palavitor Damaderosa at this point in the game. Takes out Gideon with his Dragonlord Ojutai attack.
So nice sequence of turns by Paulo. He's definitely holding his own in this game against what looked to be a pretty scary board on the previous turn.
We can see an Utter End alongside Jace Vryn's Prodigy and Dig Through Time. So he's holding all of the answers that he needs to the big threats coming from Nikita Sherbakov. Once you can see that your opponent is top decking and you still have a Dig Through Time, in some respects it can feel like kind of a formality for the Esper Dragons deck to actually mop things up and win. The fact that Nikita Sherbakov currently on 18 shouldn't necessarily be seen to be any signal that he's not in a little bit of trouble here.
Yeah, and given that Nikita Sherbakov last turn activated his Warden of the First Tree to level 2 just to gain 4 life and did nothing else with his mana that turn, I think indicates to Paulo that he's pretty low on steam.
This time round he activates Shambling Vents just before combat and Utter End comes along for Wingmate Rock. Exiling the non-land permanent. Utter End was never going to be able to deal with Shambling Vents, so took out the one target that it could. And a block followed by an activation of Jace means that the lifelink of that Shambling Vent doesn't end up happening because no damage happens. Before Shambling Vents gets a chance to deal with Jace, Jace vanishes, reappears as a fully formed Planeswalker, and now we see all sorts of action from Palavitor Damaderosa in terms of abilities he can use with it. Ticks up, just keeping it safe there. In the meantime, we've hit that stage in the game where Dragonlord Ojutai is attacking, and that stage in the game tends not to be a good situation for opponents.
Yeah, Paulo firmly in the driver's seat at this point, with the backup Dig Through Time ready to go, and I think that may be a copy of Silumgar's Scorn in his hand as well. Not powered up by a dragon just yet, but chances are that Dig Through Time can find one if need be. And Sherbakov just reduced to attacking with his measly Shambling Vent each turn here.
Dromoka's Command, not necessarily the card that Sherbakov will have been looking to draw here. In this matchup, of the three at the tables for this particular feature match, is probably closest to a regular standard match, if you will.
So here comes Paulo activating his own Shambling Vent, both of them being 3/4s. Paulo threatening to block, but before blocks, I assume here comes Dromoka's Command, which would potentially make Sherbakov's Shambling Vent into a 4/5 and kill off Paulo's blocker and then get through to damage Jace. And that looks to be what has happened there.
Yeah, killing it just before blockers so that he's able to get through.
Now, Paulo had the option there, I think, to dig through time and look for a dragon to make Silumgar's Scorn active, but that would have been a huge use of his graveyard resources there.
I mean, if you had Silumgar's Scorn, it would have been there was a dragon in play, so that would have worked.
Oh, sure, you're absolutely right. But it looks like instead goes for Shambling Vent, second activation there to block and trade off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you've got an active Jace on 6, you've got your dragon on the board, that Silumgar's Scorn is basically your insurance policy against something untoward, and at this point, pretty hard to imagine happening.
I'm 12.
Silumgar's Scorn, it's not too exciting a counter spell unless you have a dragon around, at which point it's pretty much the gold standard.
I think he was 13.
I think we're just double checking here to make sure that we've got all of our life totals accurate. A huge amount of lifelink going on, creatures that have sort of been pumped in various different places with the likes of Gideon emblems. So we'll just make sure we got that cleaned up for you. And then we'll see another dig through time. A nice brisk pace of play here from Paulo.
Okay, 14.
Yeah, I think Paulo knows he's in a spot where he's going to close this game out within just a couple turns, and he is playing a relatively slow deck, so he wants to make sure that he has time to get in games 2 and potentially 3 if need be. Especially when you're playing in a team format like this, you don't want to be the one that's dragging on your games and going to time, letting your teammates down by getting a draw.
I mean, the other side of it is when you've got one Hall of Famer on your team who can potentially help out in other matches, if they do happen to finish up quickly, they've probably got some fairly useful feedback to provide their teammates on other games.
Yeah, that's true. Oftentimes you'll see teams put their strongest player or their team captain with a very fast deck so they can finish their matches quickly and go assist other matches. Looks like in this case, that's not the strategy that
there was
Team
no
Brazil
way
has
that
taken.
Paulo Vitor Damarosa was not taking an Esper Dragons deck if that was an option at the
Definitely
table.
true, yep.
He has had something of a banner year this last 12 months or so since the printing of assorted awesome Esper Dragons cards. They've really put him on top form. It's very, very comfortable playing this exact deck. Another Jace Vryn's Prodigy coming into play here for Paulo Vitor Damarosa.
And I'm 16.
As Nikita Sherbakov just steadfastly refuses to let this game go. Continues to get stuck in where he can with Shambling Vents. Now he's got Anafen's the foremost in play. So it swings for 6 here with Dragon Lord Ojutai. So we have our first match, Belarus with Naya Eldrazi Ramp. 1 against Ataka Red, 2 games to 1. They came prepared. They found a sideboard plan that worked out for them, and Belarus currently a matchup in this best-of-3 match series against Team Brazil. Big upsets there.
And Paulo closing out the game there. It looks like stealing Anafenza with Dragonlord Silumgar and then a Silumgar's Scorn to stop the follow-up Den Protector from Nikita Sherbakov. So Paulo will take game 1.
Well, I hope that you like Esper Dragons. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more of it soon enough as we move to our Table B match. But before that, these messages.
Oath of the Gatewatch is coming. Follow the hashtag MTGOGW to keep up on the story of the Planeswalkers as they battle to save Zendikar and for the latest previews and information about the new set. Visit oathofthegatewatch.com for more information. Friday Night Magic is your local Magic hangout. Find the format right for you among Standard, Modern, Draft, Commander, Legacy, and many more. Check out your local store for details and share your FNM stories by using the hashtag MTGFNM. Visit magic.wizards.com/FNM for more information.
Hello and welcome back to round 5 here at the World Magic Cup. Belarus currently 1 match up against Brazil. We've just seen Paulo Vitor Damaderosa going a game up against Nikita Sherbakov. But here in this match, we have Evgeny Zakharenkov playing Esper Dragons for Belarus. He's up against Leonardo de Castro with Temur Megamorph. We're going to get a chance to see 2 decks that we have already seen the feature match area a little bit. We're going to get to see how they play off against one another. We saw the Temur Megamorph deck in the hands of Mike Sigrist in our last round, but he was up against Ataka Red. This very much the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to aggro versus control. This, an interesting little sort of collected company deck in some respects. It's got the likes of Savage Knuckleblade, which once you realize you're in Temur isn't necessarily too big a surprise. But once you start throwing around things like Bounding Krasis, now we're talking. Early plays, just sort of a little bit of mana fixing on both sides. Cinderglade joined by Lumbering Falls, so gradually getting all the colors online for Leonardo de Castro. And Esper Dragons currently a game up in this matchup. Not necessarily a matchup that Zakharenkov would necessarily have been expecting or preparing for too much, but it seems to be one that is working out okay for him. There we see a clash of wills dealing with a big Savage Knuckleblade, which would have been quite the problem had it made it into play. Clash of Wills filling the important role of potentially another 2-mana counterspell in a deck that doesn't necessarily have so many ways of interacting in the very early game. There we can see Bruno Müller sat alongside Leonardo de Castro. That where the extra coach is sat for this game. But Bounding Krasis is coming down and having creatures with flash. It seems like a pretty nice spot to be in when you're playing against control. I mean, when you've also got Collected Company and so on. Yes, this is a beatdown deck, but actually the Temur deck looks to be one that can choose to play at largely instant speed if it wants to, right in?
Yeah, and especially with Bounding Krasis giving you the option to untap one of your own lands and then play a counter magic spell. I mean, I'm sorry, just creatures, rather.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you options. You do have mana creatures in the deck, so you do have the option of having
with
more,
like a
more mana
Mystic
available.
or something like that, yep.
Foul Tongue Invocation here coming from Evgeny Zakharenkov, and he does have Dragonlord Ojutai to show, but Collected Company in response. We've seen so many Collected Companies whiff on camera thus far, but there's another Bounding Krasis and a Den Protector. Okay, so we have got a full hit. Poor old Kenji Samura last round managed to, between 2 Collected Companies, hit a grand total of 1 creature. A little bit better for De Castro here, and it is the Den Protector that falls to the Foul Tongue Invocation. 4 life for Zakharenkov from that spell, but now he's facing down a couple of dinosaurs. Sorry about that, fish lizard. And Haven of the Spirit Dragon there, meaning that if dragons do end up in Evgeny Zakharenkov's graveyard, he will be able to get them back in short order. An awful lot of eyeballs on this board, each trying to figure out the best way of navigating this sort of situation. Esper Dragon's the deck that's typically happy to sit back and take its time, find its answers gradually, but there's 6 power on the board here, threatening a relatively quick game if Zakharenkov doesn't blink first here. Attacks down to 15. And all this mana up, both Den Protector and Savage Knuckleblade in hand. And Den Protector might be quite a nice one here. There we go, there's the morph. Still got 2 mana up for Disdainful Stroke or to flip that morph.
Yeah, De Castro must be feeling pretty good here with his opponent having missed a land drop, and even if he hits land number 5 for something like a Crux of Fate or Dragon Lord Ojutai, there is Disdainful Stroke as an option for De Castro there. So he can just continue putting on the pressure, knowing that there's really no way that Zakharenkov can blow him out.
Yeah, we can see there quite a good selection of threats in Zakharenkov's hand. Tasker the Golden Fang, as and when it comes down, will quite handily block either of the creatures that De Castro has going on. Dragon Lord Ojutai. The 2 dig through times are ultimately what Zakharenkov's probably most excited about resolving, but in the meantime, he needs to look out for that life total.
Yeah, it looks like he opts to leave up Foul Tongue Invocation rather than going for one of the Tassigers, perhaps knowing that his opponent could have Disdainful Stroke or some other form of counter magic. And this is just a little bit safer, not using up his graveyard resources.
Yeah, he's a little bit tied up on lands here, just the 4 lands to work with, which is not as many as would make this easy set of decisions. Meanwhile, Leonardo De Castro, plenty going on. And chooses to activate his Lumbering Falls. A hexproof attacker, a pretty solid addition against the likes of Esper Control. There's another Foul Tongue Invocation. Now, what do you sacrifice here?
So it's interesting. I'm actually a little surprised that Zakharenkov didn't Foul Tongue Invocation in response to the activation of the Lumbering Falls, because he doesn't know whether De Castro does or doesn't want to sacrifice the Lumbering Falls, but he would deny him that option of doing it. Looks like De Castro valuing the hexproof nature of the manland, or just both being hexproof and also not dying to something like Crux of Fate, and decides to sacrifice Bounding Crassus instead.
So Zakharenkov down to 13 here. Conveniently, his life total has been padded quite a bit by Foul Tongue Invocations at this point. And here comes the first dig through time of this game. Such a satisfying feeling where you get to briefly feel like you're drawing 7 as you draw a new opening hand and just actually say, all right, fine, I can only get 2 of these, but they're going to be the best 2.
Unfortunately, this is not a luxurious dig through time. This is I need to find a land because I've bricked on my 5th land for like 3 turns in a row.
Yeah, this is literally digging for answers as opposed to the more sort of speculative, all right, fine, let's dig for gold.
So it looks like teammates agree. One of those is going to be a land for sure. And then looking at the other options here, could be, I think that's a Dispel, it looks like, Foul Tongue Invocation.
Yeah, lots to think about here. I mean, it's always tougher when your back's a little bit against the wall on decisions. You can't afford to be quite as sort of free and easy with things because you know that you might not have that many turns left. De Castro, patient and happy to just keep swinging in, keeping up that disdainful stroke. Here comes Savage Knuckleblade with the mana to give it haste. And big attacks coming through here, putting Zakharenkov on just 6 life. And we know that there's another Bounding Crisis in Leonardo De Castro's hand, so even if there is an answer to one or of, well, actually, even to both of the threats on De Castro's side of the table, he can still flash in a new Crisis, activate his Lumbering Falls, and still have sufficient power to take Zakharenkov to a Game 3. The Belarusians here talking through their options. I guess one of the things that Leonardo De Castro has going for him is that he will have had ample opportunity to test this matchup. Whereas on the other side of things, Team Belarus is kind of having to wing it a little bit. This isn't necessarily a deck that they're familiar with, a deck that they know, and as such, they just need to go with their decisions in the moment to hope that that's good enough. It looks like it might be Dragon time here. Most specifically, Dragon Lord Ojutai. Successfully able to block, at very least, the Krasis. But will this Naval Stroke be enough? There's there's a Dispel from Zakharenkov, which does protect the Dragon for now. Who is going to protect Zakharenkov himself, though?
But this is actually lethal on board, right?
I believe so.
Of the Lumbering Falls.
Well, we've just heard that Paulo Vitor Damarosa has won his match 2-0. So this is now the deciding match, and we're going to be going to a deciding game here between Evgeny Zakharenkov and Leonardo de Castro. The big difference now, every single one of these Belarusian and Brazilian team, if they wish to provide extra assistance to their teammates, they absolutely can do. Now, it's worth pointing out, of course, even within that, there is a certain amount of respect for the clock required. I mean, the regular round is on about 5 or so minutes left. We run on a slightly different clock in the feature match area, just so we can time things for our broadcast purposes. So there's a little bit longer in the feature match area, but not so much that either of these players can afford to hang around too much. And lots of extra voices, lots of extra opinions doesn't necessarily make for that much better decisions, especially when you need to make those decisions fast. So let's take a little bit of a look at the sideboards that we have for both of these players. So first up, let's have a look at, well, it's hard not to have a look at the absolutely beautiful deck from Team Brazil, the Teamer deck that's really sort of one of the big surprises for me, at least, for this tournament. So they have their own Dragon Lord if they want it, Ataka. I think more likely, though, they're going to be bringing in the likes of Negate and Dispel. There's
perhaps Rending Volley for an attacking Dragon Lord Ojutai is an option.
And indeed, Surak Dragonclaw is potentially very powerful against control decks, making it so that you've got another flash threat, you've got another card that laughs in the face of counter magic, and indeed beats people up super fast. I like this Teemo deck a lot for this tournament. And for those of you that are looking to build decks in Standard that perhaps, you might just not have fetch lands, this is an interesting one to consider. It does use the likes of Yavimaya Coast and Shivan Reef as ways of making sure it can still have a good solid 3-color mana base.
Yeah, it's important to note that even though these decks were created out of the restriction of Unified Standard, they're all powerful decks.
Absolutely.
And so an awesome thing about this tournament is to see a lot of innovation here. And any of these decks would be an awesome choice to bring to your next tournament, your next Friday Night Magic. They're all definitely powerful decks.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has me excited about this deck is, to me, this is a reminder of how good Bounding Krasis is, not being taught it for the first time ever. I've lost that card plenty enough in draft. So we see there Zakharenkov just indicating, I'm going to go first in this decider. I know what you can do when you have the power of the play. And we can see the entire Brazilian team there. Paulo Vitor Damarosa, he's front and center, very much the team captain. And they're sort of saying, can you hurry up and shuffle, please? Because we do not have very long. And that's certainly a reasonable concern. The clock is absolutely something that you want to... And look at this, racing to shuffle up here on the Belarusian side of things. I mean, nobody wants draws in this tournament. Yes, it puts you ahead of the people who don't have draws, but at the same time, you're then also in a draw bracket. And we know that there's the potential for games to run a little bit slowly just because you have team play, you have advice going on. Keeping things moving at a reasonable pace is a very important consideration.
Definitely true. And Paulo, a player who's has some strong feelings on sort of pace of play and slow play warnings and things like that. You actually wrote an article on that recently, so
Yeah, there's
no doubt that's something that he's been thinking about a lot with respect to tournament play.
also worth just noting that Paolo is the one player across both of these teams with substantial amounts of experience playing at the pro level.
Yes.
He appreciates better than anyone quite how timing on matches works and quite how the impact works out. There's about 9 minutes left on this round, so especially from the Esper side of things, if they want to win, they're going to need to get a wiggle on. But even from the Brazilian side of things, they would much rather have more minutes rather than less. But it looks like both of these hands are keepable 7, so we're off to the races here. Sunken Hollow for Team Belarus at this point. Zakharenkov at the helm. Just a forest here for Brazil. Most of the action starting turns 2 and later from them. Jace Frin's Prodigy here from Zakharenkov. 10 Pro Tour top 8s from Team Brazil. All of those from Paulo Vitor Damaderosa, who is sat on the shoulder of Leonardo de Castro. Watching on, I don't think we'll see him jumping in too much with advice because he respects the fact that everything needs to keep on moving. But equally, I'm sure that he's processing every decision in his head, and if he thinks that there's a real mistake being made, he will just maybe do a little tap on the shoulder. Yeah, the Wilds get stuck in for 2 there. And here's Death Miss Raptor. It looks like this is a Jace activation in response to the Death Miss Raptor. Certainly the possibility here that you might be able to find a little bit of counter magic.
Yep, and it looks like De Castro had option to cast Savage Knuckleblade that turn, which would be slightly larger and make the Heir to the Wild slightly larger as well, but perhaps playing around a bit of counter magic like a Silumgar Scorn or maybe even a Clash of Wills or something by playing the Death Miss Raptor, which is a little bit more disposable.
And also, if he draws an untapped land here, he could always just cast it the following turn, give it haste, and it's not as if he's lost anything in terms of his damage output turn to turn here for De Castro. As it is, though, it looks like De Castro may be short to land on this turn, though. It doesn't mean he doesn't have options, though. He can either play the Savage Knuckleblade, or there's the potential for, well, as it turns out, another Death Miss Raptor. Also, I believe, a Rattleclaw Mystic in his hand, so plenty of options available at the 3 lands that he has. And Death Miss Raptor number 2, able to be stopped by Silumgar Scorn without even needing to worry about revealing a dragon. Though there is a dragon in Zakharenkov's hand. The concern for Zakharenkov right now, though, is his life total dwindling comparatively fast. I mean, we talk about having to worry about the clock. You also have to worry about all of these monsters on the other side of the board. With not much time to go in this round, one has to think that it's easier for the Teemo Megamorph deck to piece together a win. But that said, Esper Dragons is a deck absolutely chock full of ways of stopping people from winning, so Zakharenkov certainly not out of it yet.
I like this Teamer deck quite a bit. It seems like it has a pretty good matchup against these Esper Dragon control decks. I mean, being able to bring back Death Miss Raptor with Rattleclaw Mystic in addition to Den Protector just seems really, really powerful as far as giving you longevity in a control grindy matchup.
It's a deck that we saw last round for USA versus Japan. There it was against Ataka Red, and it felt like the matchup was okay, but Ataka Red did get there. This time round, well, we'll have to wait and see, but right now, looking pretty solid for Leonardo de Castro and Team Brazil. You see the whole of Team Brazil looking on. There were little rumblings and rumors about Willie Adel turning to Paulo Vitor Damaderosa and saying, "You guys had better do well, or else we're not going to let you back in the country." A very active community in Brazil. I'm sure many of the Brazilian fans watching will be sort of morning time over there. Just start your day off with a little bit of magic.
So down comes Dragon Lord Ojutai, but not a hugely effective blocker against a pair of Death Touch creatures.
And just 5 minutes left on the round. He might have to start thinking about attacking with Dragon Lord Ojutai. Here comes that Savage Knuckleblade. Costs a couple of life points to cast between Yavimaya Coast and Human Reef, but ultimately I don't think that puts him far behind in the race by any stretch. 5 more points coming through. Single digits now for Evgeny Zakharenkov.
Should actually be, I think, 4 points coming through there. I think there was
sorry,
a -2 from the Jace on the Heir of the Wilds, but +1/+1 from the Ferocious.
Yes. Savage Knuckleblade with quite a lot going on for its mana cost. A 4/4 for 3, with the ability to pump itself once a turn, or bounce itself, or gain haste. I guess from a sort of R&D perspective, this one of those cards that highlights how much more you can do with a card once it has such a difficult mana cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, from R&D perspective, we were a little bit surprised that this card didn't make more of a splash in Standard when it first debuted. You know, people tried it at the beginning, but the Teamer deck ultimately didn't have a tremendous amount of success early on after Khan's release. Really interesting to see it here in this unified Standard format, being particularly effective against control decks, which is sort of how we imagine the deck would play out.
Dragonlord Ojutai attacking in here, allowing Zakharenkov to look at the top cards, in his top 3 cards of his deck, put one in his hand, gets effectively a free Anticipate. And Foul Tongue Invocation here, gradually whittling down the attack force of Leonardo de Castro, helping out the life total of Zakharenkov also. With an active Jace, 1 Foul Tongue Invocation, it's kind of 2 Foul Tongue Invocations, and at that point, the life is very relevant indeed.
Yeah, this life swing actually really adding up here. Between the attack from Ojutai and potentially 2 Foul Tongue Invocations, that represents a 12-point life swing. And even though Zakharenkov hasn't had much of an offense so far, de Castro has taken a lot of damage off his pain lands. So we just saw the life total swing from 16 to 8 to 11 to 16 the other direction. However, this does leave the opportunity for Savage Knuckleblade to take out Jace. And we'll see what de Castro has to follow up. Looks like Shivan Reef off the top will give him a few more options, including perhaps another Savage Knuckleblade with haste. Looks like he declines that and takes out the Jace.
Such a painful mana base as it turns out in this exact game. It's not something we really saw too much of in the previous game. Mana was a little bit smoother there. Frontier Bivouac making everything a little bit easier. But in this game, not only is Leonardo de Castro fighting against Evgeny Zakharenkov, he's also fighting against all that damage coming from his lands. Face down Den Protector, the play there from Leonardo de Castro. This one of those decks with morphs where there are enough different morphs that you really can't take it as read that a face down card is Den Protector. Not something that's necessarily true of every deck in Standard, but it's nice to keep people guessing here and there.
That is true.
Big dig through time here from Zakharenkov. There's 1 minute left on regular scheduled time. When time gets called, there will be 5 additional turns, after which the match could potentially end in a natural draw. But by my count, Evgeny Zakharenkov should only need 3 attacks to get there. So if he can get through this turn okay, that should be doable.
Well, assuming no additions to Zakharenkov's board or removal spells, next turn that morph will turn face up, bringing back 2 Deathmist Raptors. So that potentially represents 6 damage attack this coming turn, and then another 12 on top of that, which would be 18 over 2 turns. So Zakharenkov is either going to need to leave the Ojutai back to block at some point or get a removal spell. And looks like, oh, here comes Crux of Fate.
Well, that was a fine play.
Goodbye, non-dragons.
Oh, I apologize. It was Radical Mystic face down there. Turns out I was kept guessing also.
Right. So that'll definitely leave the way for Dragonlord Ojutai to safely come in for 5 damage.
And another Crux of Fate revealed as one of the 3 off the Ojutai anticipate, if you will. At this point, Zakharenkov presumably trying to work out what he loses to. Passes the turn.
So a land off the top would be pretty huge here, because that would allow a face-down morph and a flip up to return the Death Miss Raptors, which could potentially piece something together over 2 turns.
Just so you know, that innocuous-looking die at the bottom of our screen is in fact a very important one indeed. That, the turn count for the 5 additional turns, because time has been called on this match. We are in turn 1. At the end of the turn, when that die reads 5, it's the end of the match.
Looks like there was a land off the top, but doesn't look like it'll be able to enter the battlefield untapped with only 1 basic land. And to make matters worse, DeCastro can't tap any of his pain lands for colored mana, otherwise that'll drop him down to 5 life and leave him dead to Dragon Lord Ojutai in 1 more swing.
A tough spot here for Brazil. Evgeny Zakharenkov and Team Belarus can smell what would be an epic victory. Zakharenkov cracks his fetch land. Now, he's trying to figure out what could go wrong here, presumably, because this is about sewing it up. So, if his Dragon Lord Ojutai died for some reason, he can get it back with Haven the Spirit Dragon and have enough mana to recast it. That is locked up. That's fine. There's a relatively small number of concerns for him at this point, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's got plenty of counter magic in hand. Silumgar Scorn has got other wins, both as hard counters. There are 2 Death Mist Raptors in the graveyard for DeCastro, but they'll come out a turn too late, even if that morph is turned face up on the following turn. So I think we'll just see Dragon Lord Ojutai come in here for 5, dropping DeCastro down to 1, and anticipate. We'll look for even more counter magic or answers, and I can't see much of a way of this game slipping away.
So Shambling Vent's coming in alongside Ojutai. A couple of extra life points there. Also killing off the morph to make sure that there's not going to be any Death Miss Raptors coming along. And Leonardo DeCastro on 1 life with 3 pain lands in play. It's going to have to be something quite special. Big draws here for Brazil. They finally find a second basic, but one has to think that it must be too late at this point. Brazil scoops up their cards. There's the handshake. Congratulations to Team Belarus. 5-0 on the day, a perfect record thus far. Taking down one of the teams that was hotly tipped going into this. Any team that's got a 10-time Pro Tour top 8er is hard to argue against. But, I mean, Brazil still 4-1, a very, very solid performance from them, and interesting to see how different teams have taken this team-constructed format. A little bit of an extra challenge returning to the booth here. Tim Willoughby, along with R&D member Ian Duke. I am really quite impressed with this Teemo deck, though.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, even though we saw it floundering a little bit in that last game, it looks pretty awesome. I mean, a variety of flash creatures and counter magic make it seem like it's set up pretty well to defeat Esper Dragons, even though it didn't in that particular game. And yeah, I'm excited to see what else comes of it throughout the weekend.
Well, there's a few more rounds left for Standard today and plenty more of them for the rest of the weekend. For now, though, we're going to head things back to the booth and find out what else has been going on here at the World Magic Cup.
So, a little bit of math for you. Assuming that Belarus and Macedonia were 50-50 to win any given match, the odds of Belarus and Macedonia both being at 5-0, around about 1,000 to 1. They were not 50-50 to win all their matches. Astonishing stuff. Belarus and Macedonia top the table. They're 5-0. They are the last 2 perfect record teams here at the World Magic Cup. I can tell you that Germany, Austria, Poland, They are all at 4-1. Also 4-1 is Paraguay. Now, Paraguay have defeated Japan. So Japan's 2 losses, they beat the United States, but their 2 losses, Turkey and now Paraguay, have defeated Japan. Japan's still 3-2, good shape. Paraguay 4-1. You will see them again tomorrow. Brilliant job there. Iceland are 4-1 because they've just defeated Serbia, who fall to 3-2. The Netherlands are 4-1 as well. Also France, so great job. Meanwhile, about as far apart geographically as you could possibly get, Australia and England did battle this past round. The captain of Australia was Paul Jackson, and he's been talking to Brian David Marshall.
All right, I'm here with Gold Pro and Australian national captain Paul Jackson. Paul, how's your tournament going so far?
Started off a little bit rough with the 1-2 in sealed. We've rattled off some wins in team standard, and we're 3-2, so we're getting there.
All right, you had one of the weirdest card pools I've ever seen in Battle for Zendikar Team Sealed. Specifically thinking about your blue-white deck, can you tell people what that deck looked like and how did that work out?
Okay, so it was like a blue-white flyer deck. You know, your casual, you know, your walls, counter spells, flying dudes, and then we had 3 of the I forgot the name.
Noyandar.
Yeah, even though it's legendary, you know, we'll go with 3. Yeah, it was pretty good, to say the least. And we also had a Shepherd, so we brought it back. I think my teammate cast it 4 times in one game, so whoa.
Now, you seemed a little relieved to get to Standard. What was your preparation like for Unified Standard? How long did you guys work on this format?
Me personally, 1 or 2 weeks following up here and there. I got in late, but the guys had a couple of days and stuff, so would have been better. Have a few more days, but it's okay. We're doing fine.
Did you guys work by yourselves, or did you work with any other teams?
We worked with the New Zealand team, yeah, for sure.
You want to trash talk them at all?
No comment.
New Zealand team is right there while we're talking, so we're just having a little fun with them. So what would it mean? I know Australia has come very close a couple of times in World Team Competition.
Yeah.
What would it mean for Australia Magic to come home with the title?
Oh, it'd be amazing. This year I got a top 8 at Pro Tour, and getting first at this would be a dream. Putting Australia on the map, would be fantastic.
What do I need to know for a Pro Tour in Sydney, Australia, coming up in 2016?
I'm not from Sydney, but watch out for kangaroo spiders. You will get eaten. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't assuming you were from Sydney, but I thought maybe you could give me a little bit of advice. I know you're from Western Perth,
yeah,
right?
Western Perth. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, you know. We had that conversation. No, bring your bathers. Come to the beach.
Yeah.
We have the best beaches.
Okay. I'm a food guy.
You food guy?
I'm a food guy. What's the food that we're going to be looking for in Sydney?
Sydney's pretty good for food. Like pizzas, pastas, meats, we got it all. We're pretty good.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you go get some pizza, pastas, and meats now so you get a little eating in. So for Paul Jackson, Brian David Marshall at the World Magic Cup.
Thanks very much to Brian David Marshall. Well, the pairings are up. We've got plenty more captains who came in yesterday to talk to us, and one of those was Martin Dang, the captain of Denmark. Denmark are 3-2 right now. They need a win in their next 2 rounds. We're going to hand you off to a couple of those while the players get ready for round number 6. So here is Martin Dang of Denmark.
I'm here with Martin Dang, team captain for the reigning World Magic Cup champions, Team Denmark. Now, Martin, you've won a Pro Tour this year. You've got Martin Müller, who was the captain last year for the Danish team. How's it been in Denmark in this last year following your World Magic Cup win?
It's been really great for Denmark. Like the win last year, it started so much in Denmark. Everybody got very interested in Magic, and it helped the whole country and generated so much interest both on social media and if you go down to the local store, everybody's like, "Oh, you play Magic? It's so cool. We're the world champions and stuff like that." So it has been a great year for Magic, for the Danish Magic.
Very, very cool. Now, this year's team is very, very strong on paper. Take us through the 4 team members in total. So, obviously, yourself as the captain, who else have you got on your team?
Well, we have myself and Martin Müller, who's really, really good, and the reigning champion from last year, so that's great. We have Christopher Larsen. He top-8'd 3 GPs and has been really great doing testing, and we have been friends for like 15 years or so we all know each other really well. And then we have Daniel Lind, who is, well, he's not as experienced as the others, but he's proven himself in testing, and I'm expecting great things.
Now, in terms of testing, you guys must be in a pretty good position because yourself and Martin Müller, you're just on a team together regularly, so you guys know how each other work. How's testing been for you in total? Has it been good?
It's been really great. Like we know each other so well, and like I said before, I know Christopher Larsen really well. So the testing has gone smoothly. We know how each other thinks. We know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So everything's great so far.
Now, I'm not going to ask you for any sort of sneaky peeks into your decks or anything like that, but last year Denmark took home the title. What are your hopes and expectations for this year?
We have to do at least as well as last year.
At least as well, will be pretty good. Best of luck to you in the tournament here with Martin Dang from Team Denmark.
Thank you.
I am here with Li Shitian, team captain for Team Hong Kong. Li, welcome.
Hi.
Are you excited to be here?
Yeah, I think so.
I think you are too. All right, so run us through your team members real quick. I want to get an idea for who you're playing with for Team Hong Kong.
My team member, one of them is Lam Chiang, is a former Hong Kong champion.
Ooh.
And Lam Sihan is he played quite a lot of Pro Tour. The best is like 9th, I think, 12th in a World Championship before the World Magic Cup thing.
Well, it's a really good finish.
Yeah. And then Stephen Yun is the member of last year. He qualified for WMCQ this year.
Geez, back to back for Steven.
So I think this is a good team for me.
Now, how's practice been going? Were you guys able to get together and put in a lot of reps on your standard decks and of course your limited play?
In Hong Kong, we mainly were about the unified standard deck, and then we came to Barcelona and we meet up with a Korea team, and then we try some team still. We got totally crushed by
Oh no, by Korea?
their team is so good.
Their team's very good though. You can't feel too bad.
I think they have the best 4 player in Korea. So I'm learning in the playtest. So I think I will get better tomorrow.
Yeah, well, tomorrow's a good time to do that. Now, when it comes to leadership on the team, I'm assuming that you're taking the leadership role. Do the other players look to you for advice into how to handle themselves on this big stage?
Yeah, they ask me. Yeah, they respect me a lot. They listen to me how to do a team still thing, and they let me choose what to choose what combination in the unified standard. Yeah.
Are you comfortable in that role?
I'm because I play in the Pro Tour, the last Pro Tour, and I play test a lot in the standard. So yeah, they know I understand the meta game quite well now. Yeah.
All right, well, good luck, Team Hong Kong and Li Qitian.
Thank you.
I'm here with Canadian national champion Sean McLaren. Sean, the Canadian team is one of the favorites that people have talked about when we've asked people to make their predictions. You have 2 Pro Tour champions on the team. Tell us a little bit about how the team is lined up.
Two Pro Tour champions who have actually won their Pro Tours in Spain. So Hayne won here in Barcelona.
In this venue.
Yeah, and I won in Valencia. So hopefully whatever's working works again.
It's the paella secret of the Pro Tour that we're revealing to you right now.
Absolutely.
So tell me, Alexander Hayne, Pro Tour champion, yourself a Pro Tour champion.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yada, whatever. Platinum pros currently. Who else is on the team?
We have Justin Richardson, who's Pro Tour. He's played on a Pro Tour before. He's kind of like me, a little stoic and sits back and adds some input when it's necessary. Gives his thoughts and is a good workhorse, I would say. And also Hunter Platt, who's sort of a little more green, younger, and really wants to prove himself. Definitely wants to make his voice heard and contribute and help out the team. Very, very energetic and enthusiastic.
So you talk about Hunter not having a lot of Pro Tour experience. That's got to be pretty intimidating for him, considering the playtesting arrangement Canada made. You guys formed a little mini United Nations to playtest for this event. Talk about some of the other teams that Team Canada worked with.
We've got USA, Team Brazil, Team Italy, all working together for this event.
So 2 Pro Tour champions on your team, Player of the Year and a Pro Tour champion on Team USA, 2 Pro Tour top 8 competitors on Team Italy, and a Hall of Famer and 10-time Pro Tour top 8 competitor for Brazil. So I can't understand why Hunter would be at all maybe intimidated by the experience.
Yeah, I mean, just coming in, I'm sure people would want to be a fly on the wall. That's a pretty good roster, I would say. So I would have been intimidated, certainly, if I hadn't won a Pro Tour. I mean, there's all it takes is just win a Pro Tour, and then you're part of it, right?
That's all. That's all it takes. So I want to ask you one last question. You're notorious for being a very reclusive playtester, working by yourself, working on Magic Online, but now you've just described a situation where suddenly you're on a super team. You're working with 16 players. What was that like for you to go from working by yourself to working with such a big squad?
It was good. I enjoyed it a lot. I think my sort of reclusive nature shined through. I sort of sat back and let a lot of big egos sort of do most of the talking, and added what I thought when I thought I had something very important to say or something relevant. And I think it works.
Make the case for Canada winning their first world team title since the 1990s.
We've got a great team, and I think it's going to happen. Like that, we're going to win.
Well, there you have it from Sean McLaren. Good games this weekend.
Well, right now Canada are at 3-2. Denmark are at 3-2. You've heard from both their captains there. Why don't we take a look at our overall Masters scoreboard for you? We know that Macedonia are at 5-0. We know that Belarus are at 5-0. I've been joined by Randy Buehler. Randy, apart from that top 2, what stands out to you on our leaderboard?
Brazil has been doing great. The Netherlands quietly sitting at 4-1. Jagger Wiegersma leading that team. I think they could make some real noise as the weekend progresses.
Absolutely. They're at 4-1, but right now, playing for day 2, will it be Denmark or will it be Team Canada? Let's find out. It's time for round 6 of the World Magic Cup 2015.